I'm looking for it. I know it's there somewhere.
Time it for every 15
I
minutes.
just read it this morning.
Well, think about it. I'm here. I'm available.
In 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 18, and then we're going to read a couple of verses out of chapter 2. Some of you are familiar with it. It says, For the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. Amen to that, huh? Okay, don't get too excited. Don't get settled down out there so I can finish up here. Chapter 2, it says, And I, brethren, when I came to you, did not come with excellence of speech or of wisdom, declaring to you the testimony of God. For I determined to not know anything among you except Jesus Christ and Him crucified. I was with you in much weakness, in fear, and in trembling, and my speech and my preaching were not with persuasive words of human wisdom, but in demonstration of the Spirit and of power, that your faith should not rest upon the wisdom of men, but on the power of the Spirit. How's that? Amen. What I want to talk to you about this morning is very simply where Paul said, he said, when I came to you, he said, I spoke about the message of the cross. Now, one thing he did not say, and it may be maybe a tiny thing, but yet I think it actually has significance. He didn't say, I came to you preaching messages about the cross. He said, I came declaring to you the message of the cross. The cross itself speaks a message. A message is something that's communicated, something that is revealed. And so when the apostle addressed the cross, he didn't say, now look, I got 10 sermons over here to tell you about the benefits of the cross. He said, no, I came to you declaring the message, the cross itself. When I see a cross, it communicates something to me. If I'm driving down the highway and I see a cross on the side of the road, I don't have to stop and say, wow, I wonder what this is doing here. It instantly communicates that something tragic had happened on the side of the road, right? I mean, I don't have to stop and say, why do people put crosses on the side of the road? If I drive by a cemetery and I see a cross there, I know it is communicating something to me. When I drive by a building and I see a cross on a building, I don't have to stop and say, now, what does that mean? The cross itself begins to communicate something to me. And so when I see Jesus on the cross, even though Jesus may have never said a single word, and maybe I've never even heard a single message about the cross, just the cross itself is communicating something to me and you. And what I'd like to talk about this morning is what is it that perhaps the cross is communicating? What is it when I see a cross, and the cross is specifically for me, what is it telling me about myself? And what is it telling me about the Father Himself? Because I think the cross at least reveals two things. It reveals something about me, it reveals something about you, about humanity, and it also reveals something about God or the Father in heaven. And I would like to just take a few moments and say, what is it communicating to me and you? Well, one thing that it does is it communicates my own condition. When I see the cross, it becomes a mirror to me of who or what my condition is. It becomes, if God said that the cross is the prognosis of my ailment, then it says something about the diagnosis, doesn't it? If I go to the doctor's tomorrow and I go in there and I say, hey, I'm not feeling very well, and he says, hey, I've looked you over, and here, just take 2 aspirins and call me in the morning. I'm going to realize he didn't even have to tell me what's wrong with me, but I'm going to assume that obviously the diagnosis was not that severe because it just took 2 aspirins to call him in the morning. But let's say I go in and he examines me, and he says, now look, John, right now I'm going to send you immediately over to the hospital, and they're going to begin to start chemotherapy on you right now. He wouldn't even have to tell me what's wrong. because the prognosis would begin to communicate what the actual problem is. I would immediately recognize that something must be dreadfully wrong within inside me because of the urgent situation and the immediate, what would say, the medical treatment of chemotherapy. Because the prognosis and the diagnosis have some similarity. I don't walk into the doctor's office with a headache and he puts a cast on my arm. And I don't walk in with a broken arm and he doesn't send me over for chemotherapy. And so the cross then is, according to God himself, is the prognosis for yours and my life. The cross is saying something about my condition. I may not know what my condition is. I may not even know you. But once the cross came, I know you now. I know that inside of me there must have been something so terribly wrong that the only remedy that was going to work was that the Son of God himself come down and die on the cross. What other remedy could there have been to cure the heart of man, to deliver man from death unto life? The Father said there was only one thing, one prognosis, one thing that was going to be able to cure me, and that was the Son himself coming down and taking on not just my sin, but the suffering, the pain, the shame, the death, and the blame for me. Even though I may not even know, the cross begins to communicate to me that there's something wrong with inside of me. Jeremiah said that the heart is dreadfully sick, that the heart, something is amiss in me. You know, I may want to pretend that I'm something else. You may want to pretend that you're something else. But when the cross came, it literally revealed all of our hearts, and it revealed all of our sicknesses, didn't it? I mean, we may want to try to dress differently, but here's what Ezekiel said: God is lifting up the skirt, and we begin to see our own uncleanness, don't we? I may want to project something very different, but the cross becomes the great revealer of mankind and says that mankind is broken, mankind is desperately sick, and this is the only prognosis, the only remedy that's going to cure the heart of man. I mean, think about that. I mean, I know some people may think this, well, you know, I mean, maybe with me, Jesus may have only needed one nail, or maybe he just needed 5 stripes, or, you know, maybe he got spit on. That would have remedied me. That would have cured my heart. But you know, the fact of the matter is, it took every nail to cure your heart. It took every what do you call it, the whip on his back to cure you, the pulling out of his beard, the spitting on him, the clubbing him. That's what it took to cure the human heart, isn't it? I mean, when God said, when he looked at mankind and he looked mankind over, he said the only prognosis can be myself coming in the place of human flesh and taking on their shame, their death, their sin, their guilt. That's the only remedy. One of the other prophets said this. He said, you've healed my people superficially. You know, the world tries to tell you a lot of other remedies, doesn't it? It tries to cure you mostly through medication today. But I want to tell you something. There's only one remedy according to God in heaven that's going to fix you. And that's the prognosis of the cross of Christ. Amen? And so the cross tells me something about me. It tells me something about you. I don't have to be deceived anymore. I don't have to live a lie anymore. I don't have to live an illusion. I don't have to see people differently than they really are, because we all stand together naked before the cross. And even though we might want to hide ourselves with our fig leaves, and maybe we want to hide ourselves with our clothing, God removes the fig leaves. He lifts the skirt. He removes the clothing and says, this is who you are. Healing begins. Now let me tell you something. Healing begins when I agree with what the cross says about me. When I come to grips with the fact, you know what? God is not a liar. He told me this was the diagnosis. When I agree with that, healing will begin to take place. But can I tell you something? That's not an easy step. Because so many of us, you know, we'll say things like that. Well, you know, I've never really been that bad of a person. I've never killed anybody. I've never really stolen. I've never lied until just now. But you know what I'm saying? I'm a decent guy. I want to tell you something. The cross says otherwise, right? The cross has already exposed us. And it just didn't expose our STDs. It exposed our sin-transmitted diseases too, didn't it? Because that's the thing that's really going to cause the harm of the human race, isn't it? And so that's one thing that the cross tells me. But what else does the cross tell me? That I'm just a sicko and need help? No, it doesn't stop there. The cross also communicates to me that I am so wonderfully valued by the Father in heaven. I mean, it's like he withheld nothing to bring a remedy, a cure. He didn't even check if I had insurance, did he? It was a no payment plan. He paid it all, right? I remember when, if you're an animal lover, I'm sorry I'm going to tell you this, but I've since converted, okay? So don't start throwing stuff at me. But like 20-something years ago, I had this really good dog, and it was a half German Shepherd and half a Husky. His name was Jake, and I loved him to death. I wasn't married, so I was single, so he was like my best friend. But one day, Jake just wasn't around. I mean, I'm looking for him. He's not there. About 2 days later, he's still not there. 3 days later, I look under my house. That's when houses don't have slabs, okay? You know what I'm saying? So anyway, I looked under my house, and there he was. There Jake was. He was looking at me, so pitiful. So I called him out, and I noticed that he had been injured in his leg. I guess he'd got hit by a car. So I took him down to the vet, and the vet, did the x-ray on him, and so he came back in, and I'm there with Jake on the table, and the doctor says, well, you got two options. I can fix him for $650, or for $15.95, he can meet his maker. Well, I looked at Jake and said, God bless you, I love you, tell Jesus hello, okay? Because I know one thing, I didn't have $600-something, that would have been $600,000 to me, and I felt bad about it. But I didn't have the capability. I didn't even have I'm not even for sure, even if I'd have had $600, I'd have done it. I loved old Jake, but in the area of priorities at that point, Jake was going to have to go on and meet the Lord. Let me tell you something. I'm glad the Lord didn't look at me and say, you're fixing to meet your maker, okay? I'm glad he said, you're so valuable that whatever it takes, even if you're on life support your whole life, even if it runs the bill up into the millions, into the billions, you are so valuable, I'm going to purchase you. You know, Jesus said that the human soul is worth more than the totality of all the wealth. I mean, all the wealth in the world, all the real estate, everything, all the gold, all the silver, all the jewelry, all the land, all together combined, Jesus said, does not equal the value of a human soul. He said it this way. He said, what does a man gain if he gains the whole world and loses his soul? So Jesus puts an immense value upon people. And Jesus places an immense value upon the soul. Not just my soul, your soul, not just someone else's soul. Each one of us are valued very deeply to the Father. And I can tell you something, that's what the cross communicates. The cross says, I love you. You're so valued. I'll do anything to save you. I'll do anything to heal you. I'll do anything to redeem you. I'll withhold nothing back. Amen? Isn't that good? I mean, the message of the cross is so powerful because, you know, I'm searching my whole life wondering what kind of person I am. I see a dark side in me. I see Pope John sometimes, and sometimes I see just the opposite of Pope John. It's almost as though I can think great noble thoughts, and then also I can think very depraved thoughts. I'm confused about who I am as a person. I don't understand why sometimes I want to lay my life down and why other times I am so totally, utterly selfish. I would never understand that if it wasn't for the cross. The cross tells me that's who I am. And I can live under the shadow of the truth of that cross, no longer living in the guilt or the shame of it, because the cross is saying, yes, this is who you are, but you're so loved and you're so valued. Isn't that wonderful? I mean, who could really estimate, who could really put a cost that the Son of God himself, that God himself said, I withhold nothing back from you. And not just in payment. Peter said it this way. He said, God didn't buy you with silver and gold. He said he purchased you with his very blood. What a tremendous value that God places upon people. When I see people in light of the cross, you know what it should do? I should quit judging people, quit being a racist, quit being prejudiced. Because the cross tells me that every human being, every tribe, every language, every people, every economic group, every caste system in the Far East is valued to him. Maybe society says you're not important. The cross says you are important. Amen? The cross says so. And you can either believe the cross or you can believe what the world says about you. But I'm going to tell you something. Paul said, if you believe the cross, it's the power of God unto salvation. It will make you whole again. And so the cross first communicates who I am. It also communicates who God is. The cross says something very significant about him. One thing it says is it says how God feels about sin, doesn't it? I mean, I'm going to tell you something. I mean, we're in the West right now, and most of us go to a Western church. If you're here, you go somewhere else. But I'm going to tell you something. I'm not for sure if we're in agreement anymore